Well, good morning, brothers. I'm delighted to be with you here this morning to unpack what we began last night in our conversation with Richard Rohr. One of the things that we like to do in Illumin is to include poetry as an expression, another expression of one of the many streams or languages of the human soul. And if you might think about poetry this way, for me, poetry are like secular scriptures. They have a way of being able to use words and images together in colorful language that resides or sits or finds comfort in the human soul, not only as a deep affirmation, but as a calling forth the best what it means to be human. And so throughout many, many centuries, we've held up the men and women who have been able to gift us with this wonderful discipline. So this morning, I found a poem that I think really summarizes for us this topic of patriarchy. And it's written by Pulitzer Prize-winning poet Mary Oliver of happy memory. It's entitled Wild Geese. Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family of things, announcing your place in the family of things. Last night, as Richard and I broke open the topic of patriarchy, you're probably wondering, wow, we're starting off hard and fast. Yes, indeed we are. Men's work is clear, it's direct, it's deep, and it's soulful, but it's lived out in the real world. And so it's important for us to understand that the work we're talking about in terms of healing is, yes, of course, it's the interior healing, the healing of the hurts, the struggles, the pains, the dilemmas, the failures, all the things that we carry around in our own hearts, in our memories, in our relationships. But it doesn't stop there. Is that if we don't continue to work with transforming that inner struggle, that inner pain, then we're going to transmit it to the entire cosmos. Richard often speaks about that the fate of the soul is the fate of the social order. So how you present yourself, how you show up to your interior life is the face that you're going to show the rest of humanity, to the rest of the cosmos, including nature. And so as you listen to this presentation and the ones that Joel and Jim will be giving, as you listen to your brothers in council, as you listen to truly holy Mother Nature, hopefully you begin to get a sense of the invitation language that's being offered to you. And so this morning, I'd like to share with you a few more thoughts about this thing called patriarchy, this human creation. The underlying principles of patriarchy are separation and control. And that's why they're so dangerous. Because the danger is that this attitude, this practice, this belief that people need to be separated and controlled leads to the separation of self, the different parts of ourself saying, this is good, this is bad, this is right, this is wrong, this is up, and this is down. Now, there is a small place for this when we first start growing. We call it the immature or incomplete space, but it's not the end. It certainly is not the place of a mature human being, let alone a mature man. This separation also leads to separation from others. Anyone who doesn't look like, speak like, act like, or even feel like us. Separation from life. And certainly, of course, nature. Coupled with that, there's also this sense of a false sense of control, that I have the power to be able to control others, to control myself, to control anything and everything, including nature. And both of these are lies. They may work for a short time, but they do not last forever. And they don't last for a long time. So the kingdom of God, as we are told in so many different ways by the great spiritual masters and mistresses, and certainly by Jesus, the kingdom of God is very different. It's a place of right relationship, a place where everything belongs, a place where even the dark and the ugly and the misunderstood and the foreign and the strange, they too have their place. But as we lean into patriarchy, it harms everyone and everything. It leads, of course, to an ever-deepening distrust of women, their thoughts, their feelings, their lives, their ways of being human, and also at the same time a deep distrust of the feminine and all that that means. So just as women major in the feminine, we men minor in it, and that we too are to come like women to be able to honor both this and that, both the masculine and the feminine, because both speak of the mystery of the Creator. So the structures that keep patriarchy alive and in place are based on dominance and submission. And I must confess that often religion has been a part of this, not just political structures, not just family or cultural structures, but it's almost all aspects of our life experience have colluded in this plan to keep dominance and submission in place. However, all of us, all creation suffers the effects of patriarchy. Because you see, patriarchy gives access and to power only to a few men in society. Brothers, this is the basis for racism, for sexism, for classism, for looking at nature as a commodity to be bought, used, and sold, rather than as participant in the work of wholeness of all of creation, of right relationship. Brothers, this sociological attitude, this tool is fundamentally flawed. It's fundamentally flawed. Let me tell you why. Because the truth of the matter is, both by our life experience, both by reflecting on our own relationships, as we look at creation, and certainly science backs us up, interestingly enough, as well, that we are not separate from anyone and anything. Rather, we belong to each other. We're a part of the whole picture, part of the whole cosmos. As Mary Oliver said so beautifully, find our place in the family of things. This belongingness, this is the journey. This is the adventure of being human in the midst of this colossal thing called the Creator's family. Yes, indeed, we are not separate. We belong to each other. This is what we talk about, the work of salvation, of holding or healing or bringing together. Secondly, even though we may feel it sometimes, honestly, we're not in control. We're not even in control of our own lives, let alone of anything or anyone else. We are in partnership. What an awesome gift the Creator has given us to say, come and be my partner. That the Creator has invited us into this divine dance of being able to rejoice in right relationship, to rejoice in the mutuality and reciprocity and equality with all that is. And that when we do this, we find ourselves not being lonely, but being excited by relationship at every level. Challenging us, yes, of course. Pushing us out of our comfort zones, yes, indeed. But also deeply affirming of, this is who I am. This is what I'm about. It's then that we truly can rejoice with all creation. Not only to sing the Creator's praises, but to sing the gift of what it means to be a part of a huge, infinite choir. Patriarchy is a human creation, and it can be ended, but it cannot happen if we still believe that it's natural or that it's God-given. Or to say very simply, well, it's always been this way. And actually, as you heard last night, that's not true. It has not always been this way. This has only been in place about 4,000 years. But isn't it possible that now is the time for us to say, let's together begin to slowly deconstruct this sociological creation that others have created many years ago? When we choose not to reflect on our lives, we are choosing to say no to the wisdom of the Creator. Is that life, very simply, is a gift, an ongoing gift and invitation to continue to develop, to mature, to deepen and to broaden our life experience. So how is patriarchy manifested? I know, brothers, that you know exactly what I'm talking about, but let me just kind of summarize what we all know to be true. Well, first off, it's manifested through the media, the images that are portrayed, particular words that we see and hear, discussion of women's appearances and body image, body type, color of skin. Yes. Secondly, patriarchy is manifested through workforce leadership. Top roles, as you know, are predominantly given to men, or women who exude a very masculine type of power. Also, women tend to have lower salaries, less recognition, slower rates of promotion. A third way that patriarchy is manifested is through sexual violence. The vast majority of rapes and sexual violence is perpetrated upon women and girls, denigrating the feminine in profound ways. And so often the response is, well, boys will be boys. But as you well know, as we've studied this sociological problem, is that no, that's boys will not always be boys. That it's a whole experience of domination and control over and upon women and girls. The fourth and final way is in the family. When we look at the traditional roles of father and mother, husband and wife, and say, it's the men who are the leaders, and it's the women who are the nurturers. Well, that's not always true. I know I have a brother and sister-in-law where it's not true. The roles are reversed. And it certainly doesn't help that some people choose to not only quote scripture, but to quote it out of context and say, well, it's been designed by God. Keep in mind that the proper study of scripture is always to look at the context. These scriptures were written from the context of cultures hundreds and hundreds of years ago. Now they had a very different perspective upon the roles, that's the key word, the roles of men and women. And often it had to do with proper care of children at that day and time. In the 21st century, how can we begin to end patriarchy? Brothers, I believe that not only is it possible, it's necessary. At this time in human history, all of creation is crying out for us to grow up. In order for us to grow up, we have to grow down. We have to take an honest, humble look of how can we begin to pull apart the pieces that fuel the heavy-handed approach, understanding, and perpetration of patriarchy. So I'm just going to offer you several actions that I leave to you to begin to foster and to implement your own creativity of how you might be able to participate in not only letting go of our attachments to patriarchy, but also beginning to help support a much more balanced approach to honoring the role of men and women in our society, to celebrate the gift, the wisdom of both masculinity and femininity. So let me begin the story, a personal story. When I was a very young boy, I really thought this, and maybe some of you did as you boys, as I observed my family, I have 2 sisters and 8 brothers, observed my relatives and neighbors, I began to think, boy, this is great being male. I wonder if girls really want to be boys at heart. And the reason I thought that was to me already at a young age, I noticed this is a male world, you know? My mom would tell my sisters, make sure you take care of your brothers. And I watched my mother take care of my father. Wasn't reciprocated the same way. It always seemed like the role of the male was much more important. And what the male did was more important and acknowledged and supported. And so thankfully, it's taken a few decades, but I realized completely out of balance that what the feminine, what women can offer us is tons of great stuff. And when we don't permit the gift that they have to offer the human community, to offer all of creation, we and creation are less because of it. So these actions, I will freely confess to you, are challenging actions. It means that all of us need to embrace discomfort. It means that each of us will be asked to take a long, hard look at our relationships and to begin to ask the question, what is my task to do? What is my responsibility in this situation? How can I truly help to bring a greater healing presence to the world? The first action is to take a long, hard look at your own attitudes in regards to women and girls and the feminine. Do you see yourselves as the most important? Do you see yourselves as above and beyond all that feminine stuff? Do you see yourselves in your attitudes, your opinions, your place in life as being more important? Just because your job, your career, your vocation has an important presence in the midst of the world doesn't mean that you, yourself, your authentic identity is more important than anyone else. We are equal in the Creator's eyes. Another action is to push for your own influence, for a culture of excellence, holding other males accountable for words, for jokes, for actions, especially those that are negative and perpetrated upon or against feminine and women and girls. Another action item would be to support a spectrum of ideas of what a real man looks like. I know in my work with counseling, listening to stories of other men, this has really helped me. And I've been doing this for decades. There's no one way of being male, of being a man, is that we come to our maleness, yes, biologically, but we come to our manhood by our interior work. This is what Illumina is all about, is that together as a community, we are men transforming other men. I'm grateful for the gay men in my life who've helped me to hear and to listen to completely different life experiences that I never knew growing up. I'm grateful to the transsexuals. I'm grateful to those who teach us and other ways, not only of orientation, but also other ways of being and expressing one's manhood. Another action is to reframe patriarchy as a human issue. Many men just dismiss it and say, it's a woman's issue. No, it's a human issue. Many of us men don't have full access to power. We too suffer the effects of patriarchy. We too feel inhibited. We too feel like we don't have the authority to speak out or to make changes, but we all have the power of influence. Another way, especially beginning with your sons, grandsons, boys that you have influence over, to teach boys and men how to communicate their emotions and to listen empathically to others. You know, back in the 90s, I began what has now become a tradition in my family. As I began to reflect upon my own life growing up as a boy, I knew I missed out on a lot of good wisdom. And there was no real man to teach me what does it mean to be a healthy male. My dad struggled in his life and he didn't know how to pass it on. And so I approached my father and my brothers in the early 90s and said, hey, you know what? We kind of screwed things up, but how about if we do something different with nephews? And they said, what do you have in mind? I said, well, what about going away for a weekend? We'll go camping. We'll just talk about what does it mean to be a healthy male? What does it mean to be a part of our family as Clarks, and we'd just take it from there. Thankfully, they all agreed, and so we began this tradition of coming together. Well, those nephews now are in their late 20s and early 30s. Many of them are married. I was really touched when the oldest nephew came to me and said, "Hey, Uncle Jim, can we get together again? And I'd like us to be able to talk about something." I said, "Sure." I said, "I'll do it on one condition." He said, "What's that?" I said, "You're a man now. What do you want to talk about? What do you want the theme to be?" And I was delighted when James chose this issue. He said, "I've really struggled with my emotions and expressing them. My ex-wife tells me that that was a real problem in our marriage." And so he's the one that facilitated asking all of his cousins to read a book, which I read along with them. I helped to facilitate the discussion. It was really meaningful as I listened to the stories and struggles and doubts that each of these young men had. We continue that tradition as well. So to teach boys and men how to communicate their emotions honestly and to listen empathetically to others. Another idea is to create a collective accountability, not just individually, but in our systems for handling sexual violence. So often we turn this over to the courts and to our attorneys. I would recommend that it's not just the only aspect of how to deal with this challenge in our culture, but how can we create a system of accountability and that helps there to be, we'd call it authentic reconciliation, deeper understanding, to help both the victims and the perpetrators to understand what's really going on. What do we need to learn from the situation? Rather than just say, well, it's not about me, I didn't do it, or it's not about my family, but to see that this is clearly a human issue, a cultural issue. Another idea that can help us to begin to tear apart patriarchy is to train men and to foster attitudes that men should be very proactive in addressing patriarchy. To help us to regularly look at this and even to find a language, words, images, stories to be able to help us to come at it from a different way. Because as well as I do, we guys can get bored really easy, especially if we keep hearing the same word over and over again, or the same phrasing. So I think it'd be very helpful to address this whole area, this whole arena with different words and images. Certainly looking at particularly different videos or different movies and using those as a point of departure discussion in our own councils and small groups sharing. The next one I know is a large plan, but to even personally make our commitment to this, to end the war on women and limiting their rights. Brothers, let's name it for what it is. For most of us men, it's because we're so insecure. So insecure. You probably know now that across America, that the number of women in college and university has surpassed the number of men. A lot of young men have been leaving the college and universities after a year or two. I know the boyfriend of my niece, he left for that reason. He didn't want to compete with a woman. Not at all. He walked away rather than compete. And it was just his own insecurity, his own deep insecurity. And so to begin to grieve our own sense of insecurity, what will happen if I find a woman who has a stronger personality or is more intelligent or more gifted than I am? So what? Celebrate the difference. Encourage her. Perhaps it's an invitation to you and to me to say, what do I need to do to become more self-confident? How can I embrace that part of me that still feels wounded by a strong mother figure? Another area is to hold the media accountable. Let the media know, whether it's letters to the editor, whether it's letters directly to producers or directors, or not attending or watching certain movies, that at some level glorify patriarchy and put down women in one way or another. It'd be very, very helpful in light of this to recognize that the more time, money, and energy that we give to holding on to these outdated images, You know, as I do in the marketplace, they'll keep feeding us even more stuff that does not nourish the soul. It just fills our minds and our hearts with things that can be very destructive. And so let me add one more thing that often is not brought to the table, and that is, take a look at the pornographic industry. It's very clear that the media has discovered this is a great place to earn billions of dollars. When I often listen to men who share with me their struggles, often addiction, certainly compulsion, in being so attached to pornography online, or pornography in terms of video or written form, they find themselves feeling victims, and that's exactly what this industry wants to do, is to keep you attached as a victim, to keep controlling you, to keep you in submission, to feel like you have no power over these images. As I listen to men, they often speak about, well, you know, nobody's being hurt. It's not true. If you listen to stories of the women and men too, who give themselves to be used sexually in this pornography, it's destructive of their life as well. Brothers, the way out is to begin to speak about the secret. I recommend that you start with just sharing your secret with another man. As you get encouraged, maybe with your group of men, ask them for their support. Be accountable. Slowly, and I mean that, you'll find your way out. I remember a psychiatrist who's an expert in this field said that, do you realize that particular images in pornography stay with you for up to 8 months or more? 8 months or more. This is why it takes such a long time to walk away from this type of addiction. Another action that I think is necessary in our time is to celebrate, to look for, and to encourage shared leadership and input. Shared leadership and input. I am amazed that when I listen to the stories of women, to their ideas, how different they are from mine. And I must admit, inside of me, there are times I find myself reacting, saying, that's not going to work. And as you know, a lot of women enjoy process. I'm sitting there at the meeting thinking, okay, you need to make a decision now. But after working with women for many, many years, I've learned I need to be patient. I need to create space for process. I need to recognize that the feminine is going to appear in lots of different ways. Dreams, images, through poetry, through music, art, through dance, and through new ways of being human. The last idea I share with you is to regularly choose to practice listening. Think of that with a capital L. To listen not just with your ears, but to listen with your heart. To read between the lines as you're listening to women. And to listen to their perspective. Listen to gay men's perspective. Men who tend to be more friendly with the feminine world. We have a lot to learn. And it's only in listening that we can begin to allow our own hearts and interior life to be slowly transformed. Help us to recognize we have nothing to be afraid. Brothers, remember the tagline, we are men transforming men. We're in this together. I look to you for support, encouragement, and to be challenged. And hopefully you look to me and we look to each other. That none of us has all the answers. None of us has all the wisdom. Is that we work with this together. So I'd like to go back to what Richard tapped into last night as a way of bringing this to conclusion. You know, as I read and understand and study and reflect, listen, this whole area of patriarchy, what strikes me is this is a good example we call the negative king. Some people call it the dark king, the king that's repressed, the patriarchy that is held within each male. So let me just remind you about the healthy king. Whether we are young men, midlife men, or older men, all of us have the wherewithal, what we call the king archetype, An archetype is to your soul what your five senses are to your body. It's a way of reading reality, and typically we read reality archetypally through certain images. So there are images of the king, negative or positive, that we're drawn to or we react to. These are present in the media, present in the church, in politics, in our families, our culture. Yes, by all means. But I'd like us to look at these almost like as bullet points. The healthy king does not indulge in disempowering or cursing others. The healthy king has no desire to do this whatsoever. The healthy king does not want to seek control over others. Rather, the healthy king wants to help others live in peace. The kingdom may be blessed with right order. The healthy king does not live in paranoia or impotence, because the healthy king knows his innate power, knows the courage of what it means to be a full father, a full man. And he stands with that crown of awareness, that deep sense of a wakeful spirit that leads and guides all people, all relations. The healthy king is not tyrannical in his relationships. Rather, he is grounded. He is centered. He knows who he is without apology. There's a certain presence about him. There's a certain awareness that other men and women want to be around this man. They just know there's something different about this guy. He doesn't need to offer any real apologies because he knows who he is. And when he's done something that's out of character, he's quick to seek reconciliation. Because the healthy king is a reconciler of opposites. He brings together sides that disagree, sides that hurt each other, sides that misunderstand each other. The healthy king is the one who recognizes that the kingdom within and the kingdom without are just mirror images of each other. It's to recognize that as you truly help to celebrate, to mature and relate to your inner life, so also as you're called to discover your task in life, you are to do that as a part of the larger task of building, celebrating, living in a kingdom of peace, justice, and right order. The healthy king provides stability and protection for all, recognizing that the king is responsible for all. Healthy king is one who treats everyone with respect and brings order and blessing to others. Brothers, you and I have more power and more authority than we realize. That power and authority has been given to us not for ourselves, but to be shared with others. About 20 years ago, I did my first sweat lodge. And I was blessed by doing a sweat lodge with a man who was trained by the grandson of Black Elk. As we left the sweat lodge, this water bearer touched each of us men on the shoulder, and he kept saying over and over again to every man, take care of the brothers. You know, that really, really touched my heart. It went to the depths of my soul. I'll tell you why. I had never, in all my education, in my family, the culture that I live in, I was never told take care of the brothers. I was told look out for the brothers, distrust them. You know, they may stab you in the back. But I was always told take care of your sisters, take care of the women and the children. Brothers, a lumen, when it's lived well, is meant to teach us to take care of the brothers. Not just physically, but to recognize the man next to you, the man in front of you, the man beside you is your brother, is an emanation of the Creator. And that together we mirror each other's goodness and we mirror each other's incompleteness. Patriarchy is when we choose to believe the lie that we have to control others. We have to separate ourselves from others in order to be powerful men of authority. That lie must end today as we begin to proclaim the opposite. We belong to each other. Everything belongs together. And that we are in submission to the greater task, the task the Creator has given us to build a community of lasting justice and peace. And as we do, we find our soul rejoices with all of creation. Aho. So, brothers, we're going to be sending you out in just a few minutes to wander in nature. I'd like to describe the process to you. You're going to be given this opportunity 3 times this weekend. This is the first time. We're inviting you to wander for a full hour. Now, the wandering can take place in your backyard, right outside your house, in the urban or suburban area you live in, or a local park or local forest. We just ask that you don't spend too much time if you're going to want to get in your car. The key is for you to spend a significant amount of time in the midst of nature. And while you're in nature, we're going to ask you just to practice observing. Don't judge what you see as ugly or beautiful or great or another idea for your own landscaping project. Just notice, observe from your soul. What are you drawn to? What do you find yourself reacting to? But the real question I'd like you to notice and work with is, what do you identify with as you look at nature? In other words, you might find yourself really drawn to a tree that's lost a limb because of age, or because of drought, or a lightning strike, or a weed, or a dead flower, or maybe just a gorgeous bush just blooming with flowers. Maybe you find that nature speaking to you through all the dead matter, dead leaves or branches. Maybe you come across the carcass of an animal. We're inviting you not to use this as a hiking exercise. This is not for exercise. This is really to exorcise your interior, to open you up to be more liberated. So let's suppose you come across 1 or 2 items that just grab you. You might want to just sit there for a while or stand there and have a conversation with that one item. Now, I know this sounds strange. Bill Plotkin, famous environmental psychologist, calls this interspecies conversation. As you begin to try it, you'll be surprised what comes back to you. Certainly, you're not going to hear a voice. You have this interior sense of what that plant or that dead carcass is saying to you. After an hour, we're asking you to return back to your place where you can connect with your computer. And it's there that you'll be invited into council. Let me explain what council is. Council is a native tradition of many First Nation peoples. It is a way of allowing all the voices to be heard by those who are in the circle. It's done with the greatest of reverence and respect, knowing that everyone present has a story to share. Many stories, perhaps. The guidelines are really clear. They're simple, they're clear, and the council carrier will remind you of these particular guidelines. So the first one is to speak from the heart. Brothers, this is not the place to share your opinion. This is not the place to share your education, even your witticisms. Rather, it's a place for you to speak from the heart. Let's face it, most of us men long to just be listened to without being attacked, misunderstood, interrupted, etc. It is such a gracious and generous place to be where you have all these men listening to you with their hearts. Secondly, listen from the heart. Let go of the judging mode, the need to fix this man because he's not broken. Instead, listen from the heart with passion, with empathy, knowing that, wow, this man is honoring us with his story. Third is to be spontaneous when it's your turn. In other words, don't be planning what you're going to say. The questions or the prompts will be given to you are ones that are meant to stir in your soul. Perhaps you might need to think about them more. That's fine. Don't think about it too much. When you're ready, you speak up. The last one is to be brief. Be brief, keeping in mind that every brother needs, wants to share. And so be brief in the way you express it. Perhaps the way you express it might be through tears, through laughter, or maybe through silence. Allow your presence to be heard by your brothers. So when all are present, the council carrier will begin. He'll invite one or many or all of you to offer a dedication. Very simply, that would be an area of focus for you. You might want to offer this time up for, like, say, maybe your son or your family, or maybe other men who couldn't make this conference. And then the carrier will light a candle, signifying that dedication. And then from then on, with each dedication, he will tap a little chime just to acknowledge that you've been heard. You've been heard. Now, he will have a talking stick. Perhaps you may want to have one in your own location. Talking stick is a traditional way that the elders in their tradition would pass the stick to the next person who's to speak. It reminds everyone that he holds the place of focus. And so we listen until he's ready to pass the talking stick to the next person. So this is all done in a time of reverence. And this will go on for about an hour. And then the council carrier will call the council to conclusion, typically with a few words and maybe a common action, even though we're separated by many miles. Then you'll have a lengthy break before the next item. Brothers, we wish you well, and certainly we carry you in our hearts and our prayers, knowing that the Creator will speak to you in many ways and show you the truth that we are all connected and that we are all in submission to the higher power that we call Creator. Aho.
Thank you, brothers, and we invite those men who are council carriers, men who have been identified as council carriers and received emails from Ned. Please check your email. You guys are going to be joining a Zoom call to just have a quick debrief. For the council carriers, please check your email and go and meet with Ned. And for everybody else, brothers, we invite you to take your time out as Jim described and then make your way to your council circles in just over an hour. Oh.